Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll present about the experience in Kenya, advances in the quality and use of administrative data in Kenya. And my name is Geoffrey Kariuki. I work for Kenya National Bureau of Statistics in the Statistical Coordination and Methods Directorate. But I specifically work in Sampling Methods and Standards Division as a statistician. Here's my 6th year there. So in terms of administrative data, I want to present something brief about the background on KNBS and the way we are structured in Kenya, why we are making preference for the use of our administrative data. And then we have a quality assurance framework and a code of practice in Kenya, and how that one basically affects how we work with administrative data, the current status in terms of administrative data, where we are, the challenges that we're having, and the areas that we want to prioritize in future. So the first one is about the background. So the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is a national statistical office in Kenya. And like most other national statistical offices, we do collection, compilation, analysis, and publication of statistical information for the government, as well as coordination of the national statistical system. But what I wanted us to focus on is in terms of how statistics is in Kenya. It is a shared function. So we have two levels of government in Kenya. We have the national government, and we have the devolved units that we call the counties. So KNBS has two roles. First of all is to create and have statistics for planning, national planning policy, the higher level. But on the flip side, we are supporting counties to develop their own statistics, to produce their own statistics, because they also have more or less semi-independent, and they make their own decisions. So they need statistics to make decisions. So for the counties, they have what we call the county integrated development plans that require statistics frequently for them to be able to make decisions. So at KNBS, we'll be working at those two levels, at the national for policy and at the counties to assist them in planning. So Martina wanted me to highlight why we are making the move to administrative data. And for a long time, I think in Africa, in our countries, we are doing a lot of surveys, we do census, and it's quite costly and it uses a lot of resources. So for us in Kenya, we are facing the same issue. We have a lot of data demand. We have the SDGs, we have Agenda 2063, we have the vision in Kenya, which is Vision 2030, and the subnational development plans. That is what I call the county integrated development plans. So, and we're also trying to track most of those indicators at the required levels. And we see a lot of potential in terms of what administrative data can do. Like for us in 2023, for the SDGs, we reported 168 indicators out of 248, but we were also able to do some work with Paris 21, and so that we can actually report more than 80% of the missing indicators from the National Indicator Framework. And the data points that are actually missing in the National Indicator Framework can actually be filled using administrative data. So the same thing with the Vision 2030. We normally track it, we normally implement in what we call medium-term plans. We are currently in the 4th term plan, MTP4, and we have very many indicators that we're supposed to report on. So we are trying to really work with administrative data on that. The other thing is that it is sustainable, updated, and we can also be able to use it with other sources. So if you're able to link administrative data with the sensors and the surveys, it's really good for us because it's integratable. And that's why we put it in a strategic plan. It is part of the strategic plan, the 2023-2027 KNBS strategic plan, to make more use of administrative data, and we have action points on that. But more on that, we had the Kenya strategy for the development of statistics, the first strategy, which ended last year but one, sorry. So we're coming up with the second one, and we're also going to have administrative data as being very key for us. So in terms of quality, and I think this is going to lay the basis of the next few slides in terms of what we are doing and why we are doing it. We developed the Kenya Statistical Quality Assurance Framework in the year 2022, and it is the overall structure in terms of how we ensure quality of statistics. And it is based on the United Nations National Quality Assurance Framework Manual. So you have the 4 levels in terms of quality, the institution, the system, the process, and the output. And then we are trying to make sure that in all those levels, we are complying with the requirements. And like most countries in Europe, I think they can relate to this. We are trying to have quality reports and assessments of the national statistical system to make sure that we are complying with the quality assurance framework. And the other document that we launched this year with support from ONS, is the Kenya Statistics Code of Practice. It has 3 pillars. So the Code of Practice is a bit more focused on the producers of official statistics and the national statistical system. So they are going to make commitments across the 3 pillars of quality, trust, and progressiveness. And there are quality dimensions in those 3 pillars that they're supposed to adhere to. And we are going to be doing what we are calling routine assessments and self-assessments to make sure that the producers of statistics are complying to this. So as a foundation to this, I'll go quickly to the current status because of time. So the situation in Kenya is a bit different from Norway, and I think it's more or less the same like in other countries in Africa. So for us, data sharing is not mostly done online. We normally do data sharing through flash drives, through emails, etc., etc. So as it is right now, first of all, what we are trying to do and the areas we are focusing on is promoting our statistical offices. So as I talked about earlier, we have the 2 levels at the national level and at the county levels. So we are trying to, first of all, make sure that all the ministries, the departments, and the agencies in Kenya at least have a statistics office with dedicated staff and resources, and that has been progressing well. We have majority of those ministries, department agencies with offices. The same thing with the devolved units, the county statistics. We're also planning, we have a structure that we have shared with them for them to establish their own county statistics unit. And I think this is very key in terms of how we structure the data, how we share the data, and having people key in those offices that we can work around data. So once we do that, we have been working on what we are calling Memorandum of Understandings, a gentleman's agreement in the Kenyan case. So for us, we have established Memorandum of Understanding with different institutions in Kenya, and key among it is the Kenya Revenue Authority, which is the tax authority in Kenya. And they have a lot of data for the people and in terms of transactions. So we have a way of sharing data using standard templates that they fill in routinely for us. And then they share to us and we use it for statistics. So this allows us to make data more accessible for us because we have agreed on the routine times for sharing this data, how it's shared, etc., etc. And this data is also feeding into a statistical business register that we are really trying to revamp and make sure that it is up to date. But I think the strongest thing that we have in Kenya is the technical working committees. So on top of the gentleman's agreement, we have technical working committees, and these are cross-agency. It has a representation from a few agencies in thematic areas. So you can have agriculture, you can have trade, you can have energy, and then you have KNBS being the chair of these technical working committees. So the committees are there to make sure that we, first of all, have a way of sharing data between the ministries, and we have contact persons in the technical committees. And at KNBS as the chair, we make sure that data is validated in terms of quality, and we are able to handle all the issues that are coming up, that are coming from the data. So ideally, the committees meet quarterly and do validation of data. But it's also a good platform for us because we use it as a feedback mechanism from the production side in terms of the issues they have, the support they need. How can we bring in new methodologies? Like we have our ICK has been brought to the Kenyan context, and we call it KESIC, and it is different from the international one. So these are the platforms that we use to share this information. And there are only 15 technical working committees, and we operate in very many areas at KNBS. So it shows the gentleman's agreement is still very strong in Kenya, but we're also trying to formalize how we share data. So the other one is the development of county statistics abstract. As I said, we are supporting the devolved units on data. So we have a standard structure on how we develop these statistics abstracts. So they are like annual yearbooks from the counties across all the statistical domains. So we collect data in all the domains and publish it. So in the year 2015, we had support to produce the 47 abstract across the 47 counties in Kenya, but the support has not been consistent. So not all of them are producing annually as it should. So that's why we are doing what we call capacity building. The first thing we do, we have annual training on basic statistics for the ministries, departments, and agencies, where we train them about statistics, how to collect statistics, how to aggregate statistics, and other areas. So we also have trainings in terms of quality assurance, as I talked about the quality assurance framework. And this is part of why we are in the collaborative. We did some training with UN Women in terms of quality assurance from administrative data, which is feeding into Kenyan being part of collaborative administrative data. So we're part of the countries that piloted this, and we also pushed this to the ministries, departments, and agencies. They are doing assessments of their data and using this to improve the quality of that data. And also the results we got from this first assessment, we are using it as a baseline for monitoring, because as you see going forward, we have a way of doing assessments of the data coming from the ministries going forward. So apart from the usual way of having technical committees meeting, sharing data on emails, flash drives, and all those things, we are moving a bit towards where Norway is in terms of having a unique ID. So in Kenya, we have what we call the eCitizen, which is a platform that brings a lot of government services together. And through this platform, we have what we calling the Maisha number, which I think will be the unique identifier for everyone in Kenya. And this is helping us to streamline how we aggregate data from all levels. I went to that platform and it is quite detailed. It has data on education, registration, asset ownership, health. And that is why I was asking the question of how now we can make use of this platform to share this data for statistics. I think it's something that has been pushed to all the ministries, the government agencies and departments. And I think with time it will be very stable and it will be very key for us. I decided to put this here because in my way forward, I'll connect what we want to do to the system. So as part of digitization of collection of administrative data, we are also collaborating with the civil registration services and have developed a digital system for them to capture vital statistics, that is births and deaths, and it's now actually in place. So now we used to have documents moving between the various offices, but we want to digitize this so that they can actually put it on one platform and it is shared out. And we're also able to mirror that server at KNBS so that we can share the data. So this is part of the way we are moving now from the traditional ways of just having flash drives and all those things to actually sharing the data. And through this, we're actually able to improve on the timeliness, on the accuracy and other things, because now when you have the digital capture system, it makes it easier to flag out errors, to flag out issues at the point of capture, so that the data is actually better in terms of the quality dimensions. So we have collaborative efforts that we are working on. The first one is a collaborative and administrative data, and we are part of Task Team 1. We are working with the collaborative to see how we can build more capacity on the use of administrative data. And then we're also part of Task Team on metadata, because in Kenya, we are developing the strategy on metadata. And that strategy is not for metadata only, it's linked to a bigger strategy that I'll talk about later on in terms of sharing data and the metadata, KNBS. So we have the long-term partnership with Statistics Sweden that is focusing on quality. And that's why I talked about the quality reports, about the GSBPM implementation in Kenya, among other things that we're doing. So we're also working with the UN Women in terms of integration of administrative data, that is civil registration services and the 2019 population census. So what we are trying to do here is actually to pilot how we can integrate these two data sets, because we're having a challenge getting a unique identifier. I think it's something that we need to work towards, because we are really trying to improve the administrative data system to talk to the population census. So that is work that started early this year and is still ongoing. And in terms of feedback, we have a user engagement strategy that we developed together with UNST. And actually, we are now with support from UN Women. And we also now trying to implement it in terms of, we have feedback from the production side. We also need feedback from the user side. And we have tried to implement this to ensure we have the feedback loop at KNBS. But despite all this, of course, we have challenges, and this is not a Kenyan thing. I know my colleagues from Tanzania are going to relate to this, that administrative data is not primary for statistical use. And I think the biggest challenge we have in Kenya is having very many systems sitting in all the ministries. So each ministry has its own system, collection is different. So it becomes very difficult to link the variables that we want to collect. That's why we use templates to collect the data from them, so that we tell them, this is an Excel document, fill this data in this format, share with me. But I think we want to move forward and see how we can actually share data using systems. The other challenge we have is capacities at the ministries, departments, and agencies in terms of statistics, and having a dedicated unit with people who are there, so that you find people moving between various areas. One person is in statistics, the other is not there, so there's a gap here. And that is the big challenge in terms of how we share data and how we coordinate. But we are trying to make sure that each of those units has somebody who's there permanently, has resources, and they have the capacity to share the data with us. Of course, our capacity to coordinate all the players in the NSS. I know it's not possible to coordinate all of them, but it's good to have a big proportion of them, especially the key one coordinated under the NSS. Capacity in terms of skills and real-time data sharing, of course, is a challenge. So what is the priority areas that we are working on in terms of administrative data? So the first one I think is very key for us is the Statistics Regulations under the Statistics Act 2006. So our act was revised in 2019, but we are putting in place statistics regulation to operationalize the act and make sure we are trying to improve on areas, especially on coordination, which has been quite weak, and in terms of standardization. So that is actually ongoing, and I know there's a team sitting somewhere that is trying to make sure these regulations are in place. And that's why I was asking on the legal side of acts in Norway, how they were able to do it, because I think it's the time that we are trying to put whatever they have put in place. And then the second thing that we are prioritizing right now is our second strategy for the development of statistics. And from what we had in the first strategy, we were given weakness in a few areas that we want to work on that are key for us. And one of it is in terms of data sharing and in terms of how we integrate emerging issues. So one of the emerging issues that we have is AI in Kenya, and we have a draft national AI strategy that is almost done. And that is a very key document when it comes to statistics. So we're trying to make sure as we do our next strategy with all the stakeholders at the NSS, it is a shared strategy, it is an own strategy, and we're able to have some of those issues that were raised in the first KSDS addressed. And we're also trying to have as many people as possible in our second strategy. I know it will be quite detailed, but I think the effort is well worth it. The other part is on the technical working committees. So we are trying to move from the gentleman's agreement to having actual documentation in place that we are able to predict when data will come. We have ways of mitigating so that in case there are delays, our users are not affected. So that is the other focus area. And we also have production of county statistics abstract. These are the yearbooks for the counties in the devolved units. So we have an agreement between Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the Council of the Governors, and KIPRA. KIPRA is an institution in Kenya that works on policy. So we have made a commitment that we will be facilitating the county statistics abstract for the 47 counties. And we have a structured way of how that will be done so that we can now have a central platform where we can share that data. It can be there for the users. And you can also be able to link the counties to KNBS in terms of data sharing. So a very, very key one is a one-stop shop for statistics. So in our second strategy for statistics, we are envisioning having a common platform for sharing of data, both for use by KNBS and for dissemination. And if you go to our website, you'll actually notice we have a few portals for dissemination, and we are trying to move away from that to have a common portal. That is why you see us talking about standardization in terms of how we share data, standardization in terms of how data is collected to the counties, standardization in terms of how data is presented, so that once we have all these documents in place, we can actually link it to this system that you're talking about. I know the system is almost done. It is actually being installed in our servers. And the idea is to make sure that we have a structured way of sharing data between the NSS members and the counties, and also a structured way of disseminating data to the users and the metadata itself. So we are going to be working with data sharing on DDI and SDMX formats. So that will make it easier for us to share data even with development partners and other users like AFDB, etc., etc. And we're also linking this system to the Kenya Statistical Production Model, which is based on the GSPPM that we use at KNBS in terms of production of statistics. And we link it to the overarching Kenya Statistical Quality Assurance Framework. So in terms of the 4 areas we talked about, the institution, the process, the output, all those things are actually linked to this model. So when you're producing a number, you actually have the number, you have the metadata, you have the structure, everything is in place and can be shared on this platform. And we'll be doing that for CSV for the counties because there's a limitation in capacity. And then you can convert it to SDMX, share it out, disseminate, and have the metadata in place. So it's one slide, but it's a lot of work that needs to be done. So we are going to have a phased approach on this, and we plan to have this in place by the year 2026, 2027. So this is part of our commitment in our second strategy for the development of statistics. And I think this is what we are trying to link to the system I talked about of where you have a unique ID, we have data in one portal, we have a framework for sharing, it is standardized and it is coming to the system. And I think we're going to put a lot of emphasis on this in Kenya going forward so that we can actually standardize data sharing.